Good afternoon. We are live. Welcome, 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 welcome to Wife After Prison, Understanding Post Incarceration. Come on in the room. I'm just going to wait a few minutes till a few people pop in the room. And once you get in, let us know where you're joining from. This is going to be a very good live tonight. Very necessary and informative. So we're just going to wait a few minutes to uh, the others come in the room, and then we're going to go. We're going to get started. Mataka, Tosca, how you guys doing today, this evening?
Good,
Everything's
good,
good.
good.
Everything's
Good,
good.
good.
Good. So let's look at our devices and make sure that we are streaming live. As of yet, I haven't seen anyone popped in the room, so I want to make sure we are live. And that's very odd. So if you guys go to the page, can you see us? I see us live. We are now live streaming.
I don't see us live.
Yeah, I see on the Wife After Prison live. I see someone has popped in. Someone has joined us. So we are live. Very good. Welcome to whoever that is who popped in. When you guys pop in, I ask that you share this out. This is going to be a very Dr. Tammy, thank you for joining us via LinkedIn. So this is going to be a very necessary conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So I want to welcome you guys to Wife After Prison monthly streaming live once a month. Myself, Mataka, and Tosca, who are my co-hosts. Once a month, we do a live. We do a live on understanding post-incarceration syndrome. Someone once asked me, why is this? They said, you're so passionate about this. And why is that? And my answer to them is because everybody deserves a second chance. We're talking about something that affects not only those who are incarcerated, those who have been released, but also family members in communities. And again, everybody deserves a second chance. They are human. So this is why I do what I do. When I needed this information, it was not out there. Most of the conversations surrounding reentry, it deals with housing, and it deals with employment, but nobody is talking about the struggle. And that's one thing I so love about Mataka, who's my co-host, and he'll get an opportunity to introduce himself. Uh, Mataka came forth and said, man, there's some struggles out here. And he didn't even realize it until after he came out of that back gate. So as you guys come in, I want to ask you guys if you would be so kind as to tag a friend, share, or if you should happen to join us via the replay, just note in the comments hashtag replay to let us know that you uh, did join us. And for those who do not know me, my name is Sheila Bruno. I'm the founder of Wife After Prison. I'm known for giving voice to the psychological impact of incarceration, known as post-incarceration syndrome. Post-incarceration syndrome is a set of mental disorders that affect not only those, like I said in the beginning, not only those who are incarcerated, but those who have been released. And also, it affects the families. It also affects the communities. So this is why I do what I do. And I have to make a disclaimer because, sometimes I get these nasty notes like they did the time, did the crime, or whatever. So my disclaimer is this: prison is not a one size fits all, but however, prison does affect everybody. There are those who say, not my loved one, not my loved one, and he's still incarcerated. And like I've said before, they don't know what they don't know until they come out of that back gate. So that's my disclaimer. It is not a one size fit all. However, uh, it does affect a lot of us. Uh, okay, Tammy said my LinkedIn is frozen. Okay, Tammy, I'm gonna give a minute and then I'm gonna see if it's unfrozen. So as we have this conversation tonight, we're talking about domestic violence post-release. Okay, domestic violence is not just associated with a person being incarcerated. We're not naive to that, but there is a level of domestic violence post-release that's not talked about a lot. And I have to say this, domestic violence does not, it's not, a lot of times when we hear domestic violence, we think it's an assault on a female, but it's not. You know, there are some females that are assaulting males. You know, I have a someone that I'm very fond of. He went to prison at 15 years old. He was released at 59, and he did 39 years. He's now sitting in the county jail due to no fault of his own. But he got in a relationship with someone, and she was very aggressive towards him. But because he had a background, they took him to jail, and he has been sitting in jail over a year. Over a year, he does not belong there because again, he was not the aggressor. The video shows that he was not the aggressor. However, because he had a background and he's scheduled to go to trial, they're setting it for trial in January. So his name is Marlon Branch. I ask that you guys say a prayer for Marlon because again, he doesn't belong that. But again, this is what I want to make clear is, you know, I've had the majority of the messages and the conversations I get is from females, you know, and there's the domestic violence, and there's different types of domestic violence. It's just not physical, and Tosca is going to talk about that. But there's that psychological abuse, and most of the conversations are with women, but I have had some men who have reached out to me and who have said, you know, my wife is home from prison, or my girlfriend is home from prison, and she's hitting me and she's beating me up, and, you know, I can't take this. And so I just want to let you know, it's just not one size. It's just not one-sided. So we don't want to always seem like we're beating up on the guys. We're beating up the guys. No, this affects everybody, guys, everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to allow Mataka and Tosca to introduce themselves. Mataka, you want to open up? I'm sorry, Tosca, ladies first. You want to open up and introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tosca Tolson. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Domestic violence is one of the programs that we offer is a batterer intervention program where when someone's been convicted of domestic violence or charged with domestic violence, they're mandated to a minimum 26-week program in the state of Missouri. On a personal level, we have also lost a family member due to domestic violence. And also because of his past background, the person that murdered him was not held accountable, and she's still free to this day. This is just something that we need to talk about and have regular conversations about because it's lifelong. History's lost, family connections are lost, on top of the physical and emotional damage that can occur.
Thank you, Tosca.
My name is Mataka Ascari. I'm a certified peer specialist, and I'm in training under Tosca to become a batterer intervention prevention specialist. This is an important topic because a lot of times when people come home from prison and they're met with resistance and obstacles, there's a subtle frustration that starts to build. And if you have not had any tools or don't have any tools to be able to process that in a healthy way, then sometimes you could misdirect that anger and all of that internalized frustration. You could explode on somebody else. And sometimes it's usually the people that we closest to, you know, where we feel we're going to get the least type of consequences as a result. And so, when we look at the things that stand in the way as obstacles that cultivate that frustration, these are also factors. And I think that one of the things that we do is help people identify those obstacles and equip them with knowledge and skill to be able to navigate them.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Mataka. And this is why we do what we do. We do this to educate. We do this to inform, not to alarm. Some of the conversation and some of the, when Tosca and I do the presentation tonight, Some of the content may be uncomfortable, right? But this is why we do what we do, is to educate, equip, and empower. That is the goal. That is the mission of Wife After Prison. Last month, once a month, we do a private support group support group for women, and it's via Zoom and it's private. And last month, what was this month, we had a gentleman by the name of Andrew Glass. He was one of the panelists, very powerful brother. And during that meeting, Andrew said something that was so profound that it stays with me. And Mataka, you may want to talk about this just a little bit. Andrew said, the way that we love someone who is coming home from prison may not be comfortable to them. I think that's so powerful. You guys let that sink in. The way that we love them may not feel comfortable to them. You know, it may seem like we're always, you know, when we ask where you going, we're just doing it out of concern, but that may not feel good to them. You know, a lot of times I hear family members say, he said I act like a correction officer. He says that I'm acting like the warden or whatever. So Mataka, can you just talk about that just a little bit? It's so profound. The way that we love them may not feel good to them.
I think that the way people love prisoners is they don't take into consideration our experience. You know, reading a book about working out don't get you in shape. So we could talk about prison all day, but if you've actually experienced that, you undergo profound psychological and emotional changes, right? We always feel smothered and crowded. Somebody's always controlling us, everything that we do. And so sometimes when we come home, when our family members just want to be around us, and like you said, they just want to make sure we good, where you going, they know we readjusting, so they're curious about our movements. Sometimes, man, that looks like people attempting to control us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially after you just left the system of control.
Right,
And so
right,
anything, it might be just a genuine concern. However it's framed, however a person, what words they utilize, all of these things can be triggers. And I'm gonna give you an example. I used to think like, man, I want to just get up and go get me some ice cream at 2 or 3 in the morning. Now, a person who has never been restricted from being able to do that may not understand the significance of that. Going to get some ice cream at 2 or 3 in the morning, you got to be tripping. You better not go out there. You know, they come with all these things to deter a person from doing it, right? But it's really a person being able to move around and do some stuff that they couldn't do for a while. But when people start to question it and micromanaging and delving off into, that can be a trigger because we identify that with the system of control that we had just come from. And I believe that people's intents may not be to do that. However, when you just transitioning from prison to the free world, you have not deactivated or um, 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 you have not freed your mind from thinking within the context of your prison experience. And so
right.
that's what usually happens. We usually get that, man, people trying to control us.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought about that as I was preparing, because again, we're going to show you a presentation, and I was thinking, could it be that the way that these victims were loving these guys, it did not feel good to them to the point where they ended up killing them?
Mm.
Yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy. So Tosca, you know, like I said in the beginning, you know, we're going to talk about domestic violence, and there's different types of domestic violence. A lot of times, you know, if it's not a bruise that you can physically see, we don't think that it's a violence. We don't think that it's abuse, you know, unless we see the black eye, unless we see, you know, the dislocated jaw. We don't think that it's abuse. So there's different type of abuse. And I'm going to say this, you know, and because like I said, I never want to paint my ex-husband as a monster, because he wasn't a monster, right? He never physically hit me. What I suffered was psychological abuse, to the point when I went to the store to get sleeping pills just to put myself in a self-induced coma. I didn't buy one bottle of sleeping pills. I got me a couple of boxes. And when I went to get some wine, I didn't just buy one bottle of wine. I bought a couple bottles of wine. So the abuse that I experienced as a result of this was the psychological abuse. So Tosca, can you talk to us about the different types of abuse? Because I know that there's so many women, and a lot of women who are in a wife after prison support group.
Mhm.
You know, he's incarcerated. He's incarcerated, and they think just because he's not in the same roof, under the same roof with me, I'm not being abused. But they're miserable, and they're being abused by someone who is incarcerated. So can you talk to us a few minutes about that?
So, absolutely. I've heard a lot of people say that they'd rather have the black eye or the physical abuse and it be done and over with versus the long-term emotional abuse that comes in various different forms. And so when you think about it, there's never usually one tactic used with domestic violence. So that could be when you're talking about technology use. So where are you? The phone calls. Who are you with? Let me call you on. Nowadays, everybody does the, what do you call it? The video phone calls. Let me see where you're at. Let me see who you're with. Monitoring where someone's working at, how long they're at work, tracking miles on the car. It can be a range of things. If someone takes medication, using that against them. If somebody has mental health concerns, using that against them.
Yeah,
Using the kids during visitation, and it just goes on a spectrum. I've heard things such as a partner's taking another partner's license plate so that way they can't move around, going to a person's place of employment. And so there's just never one way that that can happen. Um, Using a person's vehicle and not bringing it back so that they're late to work, or spending money that they know that are for bills so that they have to find another source of income, keeping a person under stress and duress so that they can't think about other options or even getting out of the situation, especially if they have been in a place where family or friends have come to help them before. A person can become isolated because there's going to be only so many times that someone would be willing to intervene. And even though you might have these bad interactions or unhealthy interactions within these relationships, it's not bad all the time, right? So that makes it even more difficult for people to leave situations because at one time it was good. Oh, this person did show me love in this way. And the lines could just be really blurred. And as you said, you have slides for that. And it's just no one simple
yeah.
answer of what it looks like in the possible outcomes.
Okay. And I want to go back because I want to show this short video clip that I did. And it goes back to what Mataka talked about and what Andrew brought up, the way that we love them may not feel comfortable. And so I want to show this short clip. And my mind went to, was she loving him to a point that did not feel comfortable to him? So I just want to show that to you guys. Or phone calls. Let me start it back. Hi, Sheila Bruno here. Over the 4th of July weekend, a beautiful soul, Fatima Johnson, was murdered. Her body discovered by her daughters after she missed a celebration of life for her mother who had died of COVID. She had also missed work and she wasn't responding to text messages or phone calls. I didn't know her personally, but just reading what others said about her led me to believe that she was special, and she loved helping others. She was found wrapped in a sheet, tied up with duct tape over her mouth, and she had wire around her hands. She was bound and hog-tied, so tight that they had to cut her loose. Fatima's boyfriend, who is missing along with her car, her phone, and jewelry, is the person of interest. He was released from prison 6 months ago after serving 25 years for murder. Ladies, be careful. Know who you are dealing with and know what you are dealing with. Individuals suffering from post-incarceration syndrome are released from prison every day. Unfortunately, so many deny that prison affected them. Delusional thinking is what it is.
People with a style of denial are definitely on the list of unsafe people to avoid. If there is any sign of abuse, emotionally, mentally, or physically, run as fast as you can. Don't fall for the okie doke. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'll never do it again. Or you know I would never hurt you. Run. Resign and report the abuse. Don't paint red flags white. Don't gamble with your life. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's for you. Letting go doesn't always equate to losing. People hold on to the wrong person because they think that person can be a better person. Bad relationships are no joke. Bad relationships are a serious matter and often end up with a negative outcome. Value your life over being in a relationship with someone who doesn't have a healthy relationship with himself. When you get to be my age, you gain a heightened awareness of time, how limited it is, and you tend to move towards social interactions that are meaningful and away from negative, trivial people who are downright toxic. You cannot thrive in toxic relationships. We all know instinctively that prison must affect people beyond the time that it takes from their lives. But the ramifications are far more serious than most of us probably realize. Being alone may scare you, but being in a bad relationship may damage you. Fatima Johnson, Melinda Corona, Jessica Alba, just to name a few. These are women who were brutally murdered by individuals within 6 months of their release. This angers me. This frustrates me. I will not be silent. My silence would violate those who need to hear my message. My silence would violate Fatima, Melinda, and Jessica. Recidivism, broken relationship, even lost lives. These all represents the chaos that incarceration leaves in its path. Reentry organization. Reentry programs. Can you hear me now? Mental health education and counseling should be paramount within programs. Getting a person a job won't stop them from murdering. Getting a person housing won't stop them from murdering. Maybe, just maybe, if you teach them how to think, it will save a life. We must teach them how to win in their mind before teaching them how to succeed in life. I will not be silent. Seek to understand, not to deny. Prison has side effects. Thank you for listening.
So, um, could it be that Fatima loved him? The way she loved him didn't feel good to him. Could it be that? So what we're going to do now, we're going to move into Tosca. Tosca is going to do a presentation talking about domestic violence. After that, I'm going to come behind her. If you guys have any questions about anything that you're seeing or any questions about anything, if you would just post your questions, and at the end of the live, we'll make sure that you get your questions answered. So Tosca, are you ready for me to show yours?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Right.
Okay, so what we've done is we've borrowed some slides from Washington State Coalition. They have an activity called In Her Shoes, which shows you hands-on why it's so difficult for people to leave a situation that is not healthy, that has domestic violence or intimate partner violence woven throughout it. And so all these slides we're going to show you are different hindrances or barriers that a person may come into contact with when they are trying to leave a situation. So the first one that we have up here, and this is in no particular order, is legal. So if I have not called the police and then all of a sudden I call the police and there's no record of any prior violence, it can begin to be hard or difficult to establish a case. If I am seeking help and I get a protection order, it doesn't mean that my partner is going to follow the protection order. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be safe. And sometimes once a person has those things in place, violence can increase. When you're looking at the legal system, sometimes partners can use the legal systems as a way to, as a barrier when you're looking at children or property or bank accounts. And so, again, it's a whole spectrum of ways that the legal system can be used. If I have more resources than my partner, especially when we look at some of our smaller rural areas where everyone's connected, then the system I'm going to be dealing with, the person may be playing golf with my partner, so I'm not going to have a fair trial. So there's so many things that can be intertwined when you begin with the legal system. Housing. If I do not have a house in my name, that can be a barrier. If my partner's on the lease and I want my partner to leave, that can also be a barrier. If my partner has ruined my credit, that can also be a barrier if I cannot get an apartment in my name. We can also run into housing issues if we've had so many incidents within the home and now we're getting evicted. If I have several children and I do want to leave the home and I'm thinking about going to a shelter, if I have an 18-year-old and I have a 7-year-old, is my 18-year-old going to be able to come into that shelter environment with me? And if not, does that mean I go back home, or do I just take the kid that I can save and leave? Right. So there's decisions that are made from that spectrum. My neighborhood. Are my kids going to have healthy relationships with the people that's around me? Because if my house is not safe, I'm not going to want my kids to go next door and play. That's going to give them a sense of insecurity and stigma that's attached to the relationships early on. Then you start leaning into your aces, right? So again, it's not just one thing, it's all of those things. Whose names are the utilities in? Who does the furniture belong to if I decide to leave? If I have an animal, who gets the dog? So everything gets really convoluted. It's like trying to get black ink out of water. You can never get out all the particles. Healthcare. A lot of people forget about healthcare when you're thinking about domestic violence. I want to say the stat said there's approximately 12 to 20 incidents before a person ends up seeking healthcare. By the time I seek healthcare for a domestic violence incident, there's been a multitude of incidents that's happened that I probably could have been arrested for, or someone could have been charged with domestic violence. Healthcare in domestic violence can also be someone keeping my insulin from me, taking my medication from me. It can be somebody preventing me from getting medical care when I'm pregnant. It can be abuse that starts when I'm pregnant. I want to say 85% or something like that. Physical violence within a relationship starts after a person becomes pregnant. So if the relationship is already unhealthy, once a person becomes impregnated, that would be the first time that a person is physically assaulted by their partner. The person is less likely to leave because then there's an attachment. This can be me making my partner have a miscarriage. It can be me messing with my partner's mental health. If they do have a mental health diagnosis and I want to leave and there's children involved, the partner might say that the courts aren't going to believe you because you're quote unquote crazy. So again, it's no one approach or one way how these things are involved, and it's very intertwined, and different barriers can occur. In a lot of situations, a person won't know until they're faced with the choice of going to the hospital and getting medical care or walking around with a broken arm so that I know that my kid is safe and I'm going to stay at home.
Wow.
When we look at employment, again, this is going to be on a range. This can be a partner making you get a job. This can be a partner making you lose a job. If I keep calling your place of employment, getting to that person's money before they do when it's payday, that's really easy to track nowadays when you throw in technology monitoring, right? So where are you spending money at? What time were you there? Um, where is all this funds going from? Giving someone an allowance, taking their money, gambling habits, drug habits, right? So they're not going to have any choice but to work or find additional sources of income. When you're looking at job performance, if I have a partner that has come to my job the last 3 places I've been employed, now when I go to get a new job and they go and they check for references, even though it may not be official, is my employer, I may be a good worker, but is my employer going to be able to give me a good references if they had to put my partner off the property 4 or 5 times previously, right? So again, it's all kind of different things that when you look at an employment and finances, how they become intertwined, and it can make it really difficult for somebody to choose to leave. And even though I may not be comfortable when I stay, it could be a safety mechanism for me to stay. School. And so when you're looking at school and domestic violence, again, when we're looking at our children in school, are my kids going to be safe if we're in a custody battle? Are you going to go pick the kids up from school when you're not supposed to pick them up? Are you going to make sure that the kids go to school when they're supposed to go to school? Failure to take the kids to school can end up a person can end up with a hotline record, right? So now I'm involved within the children's division system. Then that takes me back to the court system. When you're looking at schooling, if someone is trying to better themselves in school, a partner may begin arguing with them before finals, taking their resources, not be around when it's time to go to school so the person doesn't have a babysitter to get to class. When the person does decide to celebrate, that partner is going to throw a fuss and cuss and fit and not celebrate the success that they have made in those areas of schooling. If the person is trying to study, they're going to be a distraction. Again, there's so many different ways and levels of where this intertwined. Having to go, and sometimes you have to protect the partner, right? When the kids are going to school and they've been affected by incidences that have been happening in the home the night before. So then there's a label of, I won't say enabling, but it's um I can't be honest about what's going on at home, because even though I may not be the one committing abuse, me being honest about the abuse can get my children taken away, right? So even in that time of advocating for myself, I can then become victimized by the system that's supposed to help protect me because I am connected to this partner. Okay. And again, the welfare system, that's complicated in itself. So, um, being able to get benefits, 9 times out of 10, most states do not allow you to have a male partner or another partner within within the home, or your benefits can be disrupted. So if I'm a partner that's selling drugs at the home, that can affect housing, and that can also affect my welfare benefits. If you go and you have medical insurance that you don't provide yourself, and I have to get state medical insurance, then that person that let me back up. A child support form has to be signed in order to get state medical insurance, which then can lead into conflict within a relationship, because the person feels like you put child support on me, but in actuality it's a state thing and the kid has to have insurance. So again, it's very interwoven and intertwined. Then that person ends up on child support and can blame that partner for their checks being garnished, and then they want the person to supplement it, which goes back into the money and the finances. When you're looking at the welfare system, also, if my partner has a criminal record and I want them to come and be placed into my home, can that person be placed into my home without 5,000 other barriers because of their background? Do I feel like I have to be put into a place where I have to choose my partner, or I have to choose my kids? Or then I'm placed in a position where I have to be dishonest, and I'm teaching my kids situational ethics of honesty, because when I'm in this group of people or this setting, we say one thing. Then when I'm in this setting, I have to say another thing. Again, it's on the spectrum in different ways, and you never know how it affects you unless you're in that situation. Okay, I gave a lot of information. Any questions so far, Mr. Scari? Anything to add? Ms. Bruno, anything to add?
No, ma'am. It's good
I don't
information.
have anything to add. I just want to apologize for messing up your slides.
Oh, they're not messed up.
No, we good.
I'll fix
They'll never know.
that.
All right. So again, leading back into social services, when you have certain programs that are utilized, certain forms have to be completed. So in most states, if a person gets TANF, um, they have to take a drug test now, I do believe, for cash benefits. One of the a tactic of control that can be used is, I've heard people say, I'll make my partner use, as a tactic to control that person. Then when that person goes to get benefit and they have a dirty UA, now they're not eligible for cash benefits, right? So it's a spiral. Social services can also mean, if we've had a lot of domestic violence in our home, our police have been called to the home. They're mandated reporters. So now there's hotlines on the house. How many times can I get hotlines to my home before people put a plan in place and I have people monitoring me? Again, which is going to cause further discord within the home, because you have people coming through and they have all these requirements that you have to make. So once you're involved with children's division, you have to go through family teams. You might have to do therapy. You might have to have a worker in your home a certain amount of time. So all this extra stress in the home again can lead to more discord and possible physical violence. Also having social services involved when you start looking at child support and person starts getting into arrears. And if I'm already dealing with the criminal justice system, that's another stressor and it's not going to lead to a healthy relationship. So that person can't navigate the things that they're working through with probation and parole and the courts and the fees and the classes. Now I have this back child support. When I get my check, that's an additional stressor and I'm mad and I may be likely to take that out on somebody because I've been garnished by 60 to 70%, if not more. Unfortunately, when we're looking at some of these things, if a person is not able to leave and the relationship is very volatile, a person can end up in a funeral home. We just did a trauma training in one of the early instances that I can remember of domestic violence, and I didn't know it at the time, is when a young lady was looking for help. Her kids were at home, and so she had to go back home and she was killed by her partner. And that was back in 1998, I do believe. Missouri is number 3 in the United States that when there is a domestic violence situation, that when the partner tries to leave, one or both of those individuals will end up dead due to either homicide or murder suicide. And I want to say Texas was number 7, if I remember correctly. As I shared on a personal note, my cousin, because of his background, no justice was given, even though he was shot in the head. And so that is something that our family will live with forever. His sisters are really strong and they continue to thrive, but the cloud of the hurt of that violent death will hunt our family forever.
Okay. Did you want to add anything else to that, Tosca, in closing?
Mm. I tried to put the power and control wheel in the chat box. I'll try to go back and look at
Okay.
that. So when you need a place to start, because I've noticed a lot of people don't know how to identify what a healthy relationship is. A lot of people haven't had examples of what a healthy relationship looks like. And so we always get started out what you don't like, if it makes you feel funny, if you find yourself again saying yes when you want to say no, or saying no when you really want to say yes, then it may not be healthy. Using the power and control wheel as a basic tool of what may be a warning sign of what to look for when a relationship is not healthy. Again, that may include intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming. If I have to say, oh, that was all in your head, that didn't happen, or I didn't mean it to that way, if I find myself explaining too many times that somebody else's actions that hurt you, then you are probably not in a healthy relationship. Using children, economic abuse, coercion, and threats. If you don't do X, then I'm going to do Y. Or if you wouldn't have did such and such, then I wouldn't have had to put my hands on you. All those things are red flags. And again, um, a lot of people remember the good times. However, remember that 30 seconds of a really bad time can just take you off of this earth, like literally.
Right, right. Yeah, I was reminded of a gentleman who is in San Quentin, I think San Quentin, in California prison. And after he read my book, he wrote me a letter. And he said, if I would have had this information, he said, perhaps my wife would still be alive. He said, a civil conversation turned from civil to homicide, you know. So that's why it's important that we talk about it. It's okay, it's great, guys, we talk about jobs, employment, and housing and all of that. But if we don't talk about post-incarceration syndrome, then we are doing an injustice, a disservice to not only system impacted individuals, but to families and communities. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a young lady. The very same day that her guy got out, he sexually assaulted her. Now, no means no. I don't care if you are in a relationship. He had just gotten out of prison that very same day, and he sexually assaulted her. Not only did he sexually assault her, he broke into her house and held her hostage with a knife and her keys so that she wouldn't leave. And just last week, latter part of last week, I got a message from her. Y'all know I cry, baby. But she is now rethinking going through with the charges against him. So I want my sisters, and not only my sisters, I got to put my brothers, just be aware and don't paint the red flags white. And again, domestic violence, abuse is not just physical. There's a lady who also told me that her guy who is in prison, she has cameras, and with technology, you can be anywhere and access the house. And he has a phone on the inside, and he's watching her every move. I said, you have given him access to your house. That's a form of domestic violence. It's control. Where are you? You're supposed to be home. Where are you? So I just want you guys to understand the importance of this, and it could save your life. So now I'm going to show you a presentation that I've done inside the prison as well as at parole offices. And this is talking about the 6 stages. It's post-release symptoms progression. The 6 stages when you know that a person is in trouble. You know that a person is in trouble, and it's a possibility that they are headed back to prison. So I wanted to make not only system impacted citizens aware of this. If you are experiencing any of the symptoms that I'm about to show you, seek help. Not only is it for the system impacted citizens, this is for family members, this is for community leaders, this is for reentry programs. If you see any of these symptoms in anybody that you know that have been incarcerated, this person is in trouble.
Ms. Bruno,
Yes.
Just to further what you said, when we was talking about how, like, when one of the issues for me is, man, I didn't even know what post-incarceration syndrome was, nor the symptoms. So nobody told me about it so that I could do anything. So one of the beautiful things is, right, being able to make people aware, honesty, transparency on the part of the person you're talking to about it, right? And then developing ways to deal with it prior to incarceration, pre-release.
Yeah. Talk to them now about it. And one of the things that when I was going into the parole offices, I used to go in, when they have their monthly meetings. But I said to the parole supervisor, I need to talk to them when they get off the bus. I don't need to talk to them 3-4 months down the line. Can I come in and greet them and welcome them home and tell them and show the signs? So if they see any of this stuff, they can say, hey, something's not right with me. But if we are so afraid for whatever reason to talk about mental health and reentry, if we're so afraid to talk about mental health and reentry, if it's due to funding for whatever it is, lack of knowledge, we have got to bridge that gap. We have got to bridge that gap. Our mental health professionals, some have said, I've never heard of post-incarceration syndrome. I've never had a client who has been incarcerated, so I don't know these things. I want to know. So we need more mental health professionals who are willing to come to the table and talk to the Matakas, talk to the Andrews, talk to the Kevin Brunos to find out how that you can better serve them, right? And this is not a they problem. This is a we problem. It affects us all. So I'm going to show this clip Let's go back. Sorry about that. I didn't have it in order. But again, this is the road to reentry. This is something that I created just to give the guys on the inside, and I say guys because I've never had the privilege yet or the opportunity yet to get inside of a women's prison. But this is a presentation that I did. What is post-release symptoms progression? As a result of formerly incarcerated citizens experiencing PICS, post-incarceration syndrome, they tend to experience a 6-stage post-release symptom progression leading to recidivism. Currently, 60% of incarcerated individuals have been in prison before, and there's a growing evidence that the post-incarceration syndrome is a contributing factor to this high rate of recidivism. Progression. The process of developing or moving gradually towards a more advanced state. So stage 1, helplessness and hopelessness due to inability to develop a plan for community reentry, often complicated by the inability to secure funding for treatment or job training. So Mataka, what are some of the symptoms? What are some things that behaviors when a person is feeling helpless and hopeless? What are some of the reasons they may be feeling as such?
Sometimes you have individuals who come home who really want to do the absolute right thing, because prison, nobody really want to go there. However, if you don't have the skills and the foresight to be able to anticipate the things you're going to encounter, then oftentimes it'll lead to stress. As a convicted felon, we already have barriers set up against us when we come home. Jobs, right? You could have committed a crime 25 years ago, and they still holding you accountable for that, even though you've exhibited multiple proofs of rehabilitation. So when you're part of a family structure, or just as an individual, when you don't have the ability to get a job, you don't have the ability to get the resources that you need, even though you want to put forth an honest effort because of these barriers, this creates this frustration. This frustration creates a sense of despair, helplessness, and hopelessness. And two things usually come from that. Either with one or two results. People tend to re-engage back in self-medication or self-medicating because they don't know how to deal with this stress. They've never got the skills or the tools, or they revert back to full-blown criminal activity because people have to have some money, right? And what usually happens is this ends back up being a person being reincarcerated or going to the grave.
Okay, thank you. Step 2, intense, immobilizing fear. Talk to us about that.
So so when we talk about intense, immobilizing fear, sometimes it might not be intense to the person observing, because one thing I've noticed is that people who have pride and people who have gone through things, they tend to suffer quietly internally. So externally, a person does not see the intense, immobilizing fear, but I'm contemplating it. I'm dealing with it, right? Man, I got to go in front of these people for a job interview. They're going to ask me the felony questions. So we start to develop in our mind all of these ideas that creates this self-defeating behavior. And it creates a sense of paralysis because we don't feel like we can do anything. Now I can't get a job. I can't pay bills. I don't have nowhere to go. And from this, it creates this fear, this belief that you cannot make it out here. That creates frustration and tension also.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I saw these behaviors. I saw these behaviors in my ex-husband. I saw the intense, immobilizing fear. I saw him suffering in silence to the point where it was like a pipe. He was suffering in silence. And finally, one day he said, I don't like the person that I'm becoming. I don't like this person. It scared him because he know that the person that was familiar behavior to him, right? So like Mataka say, a lot of times our loved ones, they suffer in silence. They don't talk about it because they don't want to be stigmatized. And then family members, community leaders, reentry organizations who don't understand, right? So they don't talk about it. Again, like I say, if we don't talk about it, they don't talk about it. So they suffer in silence. And then there's that fear. If I don't deal with this, man, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something to somebody. I'm going to do something to myself, right? So we have to know the signs.
Ms. Bruno, a lot of people don't like to talk about that fear because what happens is the same system that is associated or touts that it is a rehabilitative organization, right? Correcting organization, correctional center, correctional facility, or whatever. Actually, right, it's the one that's causing the trauma and doing the damage. And so what happens is when we start to talk about that and how a lot of that those psychological mental illnesses are grown in prison, that makes the system accountable, and don't nobody want to, they don't want to accept responsibility for that.
Right, right. Stage 3, intense free-floating anger and rage, and the emergence of flashbacks and other symptoms of PTSD.
Yeah, anger is an issue. It is.
Yeah.
It's an issue, especially when you have had to suppress it. In most cases, being in an oppressive environment, right? Not having the ability to deal with it internally and resolve it. So a lot of times, because of the situation of prison and how we are mistreated and we experience oppression, your natural response would be to fight back or run, and there's really nowhere you can go. And so you are forced to deal with this situation and internalize this for fear of external consequences. And you got all this stuff bottled up inside of you. Then one day they say you free. You free, go ahead, you made parole. Right, with no tools, no skills, no knowledge, and we facing a world that we really don't know. And again, the key thing that I think people should look for is you start to identify frustration, small things that might that do not normally frustrate people, little bitty things. And so what that is in most cases, people like me, like really, I don't talk about a lot of stuff to people, but people who know my behavior and my behavior patterns, they can identify certain things as they start to change and what they could potentially lead to. So observation and identifying those small things like points of frustration is important, because if it's not dealt with, if it's not processed, if it's not taught, nobody knows how to manage it in a healthy way, it's going to create that volatile situation, and that anger and that rage going to come.
Yeah. And, I've heard some that say, I can't express what I feel. So this angers me. I can't articulate, how I'm feeling. So this angers me. Right. So a lot of times, they're dealing with some things. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to tell us. So this is where we have to teach them how to communicate what you're feeling.
Ms. Bruno, you also talked about other symptoms of PTSD too. Outbursts of anger, exaggerated startle response, hypervigilance.
Yeah.
One of the things that's specific to post-incarceration syndrome, when you go back to stage 1, that hopelessness and helplessness. Man, somebody been making decisions for me for the past 25 years. I don't know how to pay no bills. So that's a chronic sense of helplessness due to the suppression of lifestyle choices. Now, I don't want to come out here and start asking a bunch of people for help about doing this and doing that, because, I got this sense of pride. And so as a result of us not doing that, again, that frustration sets in, because somebody has made decisions for us for the past 25 years.
Right.
Man, I don't even know how to go into the restaurant and zero in on the menu for what I want, because people been picking my meal for me for the last quarter century.
Yeah.
And so that is also a post-incarceration syndrome symptom, a chronic sense of helplessness due to the suppression of lifestyle choices.
All right, Mataka. Okay, so stage 4, a tendency towards impulse violence upon minimum provocation. And what I witnessed in what some of the conversations that I've had with family members is like, he gets angry about the least thing. The least thing sets him up, sets him off. So you see the different stages, guys, that we have to be aware of, whether you're system impacted, whether you're family members or whatever. Do you see these stages? And think back. And just think back, whether it's your loved one, whether you've been in prison, think back. Have you been from stage 1? to stage 2. Have you ever experienced anything like these particular stages, so that you can be aware, like, hey man, I must be in trouble. I'm in trouble, right? If I'm getting angry about the least things, if I'm getting angry because somebody asked me a question, if I'm getting angry because somebody just asked me to shut the door, if I'm getting angry because somebody asks me what time am I coming home and I go off and I'm blowing up, if I'm getting angry about the least thing, if they're getting angry, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. And we be like, man, it wasn't, I know for me, I was like, man, it ain't that serious. I just asked you, can you move this coffee cup off this whatever? And
so
it
Miss
just
Bruno,
flow.
you know what that is. Like sometimes, man, when people overreact and react in a way that's not seem to fit what the scenario, or what they overreacted. Usually, that's an indicator that there's something else going on. Right, it's something deeper going on. It's a buildup of frustration. So the slightest thing can trigger it, and it all come out at that time. And you like, what's going on?
Right? It's an accumulation of all of that from the stage 1. Everything is a accumulation of all of that that's leading up to stage 4 and stage 5.
One more thing, Miss Bruno, before we go on, I also want us to understand, like, in prison, we are products of a culture that tells us, listen, I got to react violently or at least aggressively at minimal provocation, or I'm going to become prey. And so as a result of being in there a long period of time, this becomes your lifestyle because it's a survival mechanism, right? Mm-hmm. You either going to victimize, you're going to stand on yours, or you're going to be a victim. And so when this becomes your lifestyle and your defense mechanisms and your survival skills, transitioning from prison to the free world, man, you can't just put them down like that. And you're not, because they kept you safe for a long time. And right. So you it's a product of conditioning. I'm used to responding a certain way when I feel like you disrespected me, even if it's just the smallest slight. Man, did you move my tennis shoes? Did you move my stuff? Right? Simple stuff like that. But it's really an indication that there are deeper underlying issues.
Yeah. Stage 5, marked by effort to avoid violence, by severe isolation to avoid the triggers of violence. Now, this one here, I had a gentleman to reach out to me, and he said that I was a fighter in prison. He said, I fought. He said, I fought my way. And I was like, how did you survive prison? He said, I fought. And so now that he's out, that behavior just didn't stop when he came out that gate. He will still fight. So to avoid fighting, to avoid going back to prison, he isolates himself. He doesn't want to go nowhere. He doesn't want to be around people. He stays in not only does he stay in the house, he stays in the room in the house, because he understands that I was a fighter. So if you see your loved one that's just always, I didn't understand that in the beginning. I didn't understand the isolation part of it, but I understand now that it's a survival technique for him. Matak, you want to talk about that?
Yes, ma'am. It's definitely that. A lot of times too, what part of post-incarceration syndrome and institutional syndrome is a deficit in social life skills. Man, if you've been a certain way in prison for a long time, when you come out here, you're going to have to learn new social skills. And sometimes that's hard to interact with people, especially when you've been conditioned to operate and think a certain way for a long period of time. And if you don't want to get in trouble and you don't have the social skills, then people just tend to isolate. Right? I just ain't going to mess with nobody, man. I'm going to be by myself. That's me sometimes. Right. Sometimes I like being by myself because I don't feel like messing with nobody. People be tripping. We got these things because sometimes what I've noticed is that a lot of my guys who are from prison, like we talk and we share our experiences because we have a shared experience. But people who have not been through that, who do not understand that, right, they won't understand our inability to socialize with people who have not been through these experiences. And so what we do is we tend to withdraw and isolate. Like, I don't got time for that. I ain't hanging out with them. They don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So this next stage, I'm just going to show the slide. So before I get to stage 6, this is Tiffany, Mia, and this is her husband, Showtime. Showtime did 10 years. Tiffany has been a part of Wife After Prison Support Group since I started the group in 2018. Tiffany was the cheerleader. You know, women would come into the group and they're like, this is hard. I don't want to do this. You know, I'm losing myself, or what have I gotten myself into? And Tiffany was always the cheerleader. Hey, you're going to have patience, need patience. Hang on in there. She was always giving them an encouraging word. So this is what she posted: 35 days and a wake up, right? She's going to pick up Showtime. So the other picture is, I don't even think that they had left the parking lot yet. And that was Showtime's first car ride home. Again, he had been locked up for 10 years. This is stage 6, marked by the intensification of flashback, nightmares, sleep impairments, and impulse control problems caused by self-imposed isolation. This leads to acting out behaviors, aggression, violence, and crime, which in turn sets the stages for arrest and incarceration. Within 5 hours of his release, she called me from the emergency room. They hadn't even gotten to the destination. Within 6 hours of his release, he was back in custody after doing 10 years. After doing 10 years, right? And so I asked her, you know, what happened? What happened that made Showtime, you know, react like this, you know, within hours of his release? His anxiety level was so high that he wanted to get a beer or something to calm him down. And that made the matters worse. He became aggressive. He became very, very aggressive to the point where, you know, they ended up wrecking the car, hitting the medium in the road, totaling out her car. This is within 6 hours, guys, right? So I'm led to believe that Showtime came out at a level 6, at a stage 6, right? And like you said, Matak, a lot of this stuff is happening on the inside. This doesn't just start when an individual comes out the back gate. And this is what people don't understand. They get confused because the name of the mental disorder is post-incarceration syndrome. But don't get it twisted. It's a lot of post-incarceration syndrome inside the prisons today, right? This is stage 6. Husband released January 2019. 60 days later, she's in a coma. 4 days later, she passes away. 5 children left without their mother. Stage 6. Can anybody look at this picture and tell me what's wrong with this picture? If you can tell me what's wrong with this picture, put it in chat for me. Just look at this picture, other than I have his face blocked out. I'm gonna wait a few minutes. If anybody can tell me what's wrong with this picture, please do so. Okay, so somebody said he isn't smiling. Anybody else want to comment? What's wrong with that picture? This is Brittany, sweetheart. very kind person, very kind, loving person, was one of the volunteers that went into the prison with me. Donna says she has a bruise. Charlotta said black eye. She has 2 black eyes. This was within months of his release from prison. But she stayed. She stayed until eventually it got too bad. And like Tosca talked about, the social services and all of these other entities coming into play, you know, the children, the school, all of that. She was affected by all of that, having to deal with all of that due to domestic violence. We don't think about that. That's stage 6. I don't have time to talk about this story, but this story, I'll just tell you briefly. This story, I received a message from a wife, and she said that her husband was out. He was doing good. He had a good job, and his family members tried to encourage him just to go seek some help. Go talk to somebody. You've been in a cage all of this time. Just go talk to somebody. But he thought because he had a good job, he lived in a nice gated community. You know, he had family support. He thought he was good. 5 years later, he's back in prison. And this is what he said. He said, when you put a person in a certain environment, they become adapted to it. Survival of the fittest. And then when you take that person out of that environment, they don't know how to adapt. And what he was saying was, he knew how to survive. He knew how to adapt in prison, but he did not know how to survive and adapt on the inside. And so 5 years later, he's back in prison. So that's that stage 6. That's recidivism. So what I do is, after this presentation, of course, you know, we want to encourage them to seek help. It's okay to talk to somebody, yeah. And we have to be able to, you know, let them also see that we have some issues too. Because a lot of times we think just because a person has been incarcerated that they have all of the issues. And that's not true. It took me going to a therapist, thinking I was going to talk about Kevin and all of his issues, for her to see me. So I want family members to understand, we can't look at our returning citizens like they're a stain, they're a disgrace, they're dysfunctional. We cannot. We have to seek to understand and not to deny the effects of imprisonment. We have to understand trauma. We have to understand adverse childhood experience. It didn't start while they were in prison. There was some experiences that started pre-incarceration that was the pipeline to prison. Right? This conversation, post-incarceration syndrome, is like an onion. We can never cover everything. But on this platform, we're going to bring it to you every month. It's like we're going to be forcing it down your throat so that you can understand. Some of you guys, go ahead.
I wanted to say this real quick. I was just thinking about this. You know how like we encourage people, yeah, come on, get out of prison. But how do we encourage people to get the prison out of them? Right. So that's what this is about. It's about helping people identify certain things and getting the prison out of them, because you can be released from prison, but you can still carry that with you, right? Which
Yeah,
most of us do who struggle with post incarceration syndrome. So
yeah,
the idea, as we encouraging people, listen, don't get in no trouble. You this close to going home, or you got a couple of years before you see the parole board, while we encouraging them to engage in behavior that's a pathway to the door so they can get out of prison, we should go through the process of trying to help prison get out of them also. Because
right.
you can't be free. You can't be free and be in prison. That ain't gonna work.
Yeah,
Eventually the worlds are gonna collide and it's gonna be a situation.
yeah. Gigi, who do you recommend them talking to? Most times they're afraid of speaking up out of fear or for being sitting back. You know what? And this is the thing. A lot of times, some of the guys that I've talked to, one in particular, Marlon, uh, went in at 15, came out at 54. And I asked him, you know, going in at 15, did you have a mental health diagnosis? You know, and he said, no, ma'am. I said, you didn't have any type of mental health diagnosis, didn't no treatment or anything. You went in at 15. And he said, no, ma'am. I said, okay, so you went from unit to unit to unit, and you never had any type of mental health treatment or anything? And he said, no, ma'am. And I said, okay, well, post release, you're getting ready to be released, and you go to a post release unit. Did you talk to anybody? And he said, Miss Bruno, he said, when I hear the word mental health, I think it means that I'm crazy. And so when I began to debunk and talk to these guys and said, mental health does not mean that you're crazy. It's just the way you think, the way you behave, the way you act. They are open to the conversation. And right now, like I said to you guys, Marlon is back incarcerated due to domestic violence against him. Against him. And I talked to him last week. And so Marlon, initially, he was like, Miss Bruno, I'm good. I got you. We would have sessions every week. He said, I'm good. I ain't got to talk about it. Nobody, I got you.
The system failed that brother.
Yeah. And when I talked to him last week, he said, Miss Bruno, because we believe he's going to beat this case. He's going to trial in January. He said, Miss Bruno, when I get out, I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody. So Gigi, a lot of them do not talk because their concept of mental health is that you're crazy. So my thing is this. We have to build more peer-to-peer support groups where they'll have an avenue to talk to somebody. So this is one of the projects that Mataka and Tosca and I are going to work on, to get a peer support group for men. We have one for women, for family members, but they need an outlet. They need to be able to talk to somebody, a mentor, a coach. They have to be able to talk to somebody. Tosca, you want to talk about this? Who do you recommend them talking to?
Being able to find somebody that they trust is a good place to start. Using resources that are within your community. So I'm not sure where you're at. I know that some probation and parole offices do have funds set aside for mental health and therapy. It's a matter of advocating and seeing what resources are available. um, utilizing somebody who has been through the same thing. Unfortunately, there may not be a lot of reentry funds in your community. I refer a lot of people to see Mataka. And then just having resources available for them in general where they can have the opportunity to meet people that are like minded. So, whether that be referring somebody to um, a mental health retreat, or does that mean you have them go take art classes so they can start to build new skills so that
Mhm.
they have an option in order to choose how to respond when they're frustrated, upset, and stressed out? And so there's no one right answer of where to go to get help. Encouraging people to put stuff down on paper. One of the things we've implemented into our program is that my guys do journal prompts at the beginning of each group, my ladies and my females, right? And I see wheels turn in a different way when they have to sit and reflect and think about the choices. And so just seeing what's available, seeing what that person's willing to do, because again, I dub myself a resource queen, but if it's not something that a person is willing to try, then it's not going to work. So ask that person what they're willing to do in order to have somebody support them. That way it doesn't feel like it's their weaknesses, because most people are doing things right. Where can we support you so you can do more things right?
Okay, Tosca. And in regards to this question here, is there a place where returning citizens can get together and talk about their fears and needs? Last week, I had a conversation with a LinkedIn connection. His name is Alvin Kimball, and we're going to have him on in the coming days. But he reached out, and he did over 20 something years, and he reached out, and one thing that I'm seeing that returning system impacted men are reaching out, and they're saying, keep talking about this. You know, we need this awareness. And one thing that Alvin and I spoke about is he said, I'm winning in other arenas arenas in my life. He said, but in my relationships, I'm failing. So he wants to come to the table and he wants to have a conversation. He wants to talk about it. What am I doing? Or what am I not doing in the arena of relationships? So when guys come to me like that, yeah, we're going to talk about it. And I'm so grateful to him that he's one of the ones who spoke up and spoke out. He says, I want to lend my voice. So in coming weeks, we're going to have him on along with a couple of other guys who have been incarcerated, who have said, I'm winning on my job. You know, I'm winning. I got a nice place. I got a nice car. I'm winning in all of those different areas of my life, but in my relationships, I'm failing. So we want to help them. We want to help them. Perhaps he's at a stage one. And another thing that I'm hearing is, and I've heard this not only from family members, but also from returning citizens that, hey, my lady saying I'm aggressive. And I didn't realize that I'm aggressive. And one guy said after 3 years of being home, one day his wife said, please sit down and talk to me. And she told him, you're aggressive. You're aggressive in your behavior. You're aggressive in your tone. So we need to hold that mirror up to them and say, hey, this don't look right. You know. So Mataka, I heard you talk about aggression one time. Talk to me about
I
aggression.
just used to there's been people say that I talk like aggressively, right? And I just, to me, it's just a normal style of communication that I've been utilizing for the past 27 years. It's normal communication. Most of that came about as a result of, a lot of it came from the community, but of course it was exacerbated in prison, because now you got to, it's different. And so of course it's a tactic, it's a survival strategy. And so um again, it's a tactic, it's a survival strategy. And when you leave prison, you don't just drop that off with you. You bringing that with you because this is something that has kept you safe or defended you for the past 25, 30 years. And so even in casual conversation, normal conversation, one thing I do is, and I'm trying to work on is, man, I debate aggressively, right? Because I had this overwhelming, I gotta win, right? And so I remember one of the things that Miss Tolson asked,
Debate is debatable.
huh?
The word debate is debatable.
Yeah, I use that word intentionally. So she says, what would you rather be, happy or right? And so with that, I had to reflect for myself, why do I have this intense need to be right? Because I feel like I need to exert myself over somebody else in order to keep my anything intact, my reputation, my safety, or whatever. And so it's a behavioral trait that I learned as a result of growing up in a certain environment and then it intensifying in prison. And to me, it's just normal communication.
Yeah.
It's just normal communication. And so I ain't gonna lie, when people point it out to me, sometimes I cringe, and then sometimes I'm like, what you mean talk aggressive? This is just me talking normally. But again, I was socialized by different conditions. And so I can definitely understand how people see that.
But Mataka, if multiple people are telling you the same thing, you have to be willing to look at that.
You do.
Right?
You
You
do.
have to be willing to look at that. Okay, so Mario, there's no reentry preparation for the incarcerated or their families. You know what? I so agree with you. And this is the issue that I have with reentry programs, that they are sugarcoating. And I think in whatever, they are not giving them facts. They're not telling them what to expect. The psychiatrist has said that those on the inside needs to understand the effects of imprisonment. Everybody else know about it. You know, you coming home and your loved one know about post-incarceration syndrome. They know about the effects of prison, and you know nothing. So I am, and I am in the, I am currently creating a program, Train the Trainer. And we're going to talk about post-incarceration syndrome. I am going to train and teach others what I know, the receipts that I have, so that you can go into your communities, you can go into your churches, you can go into prisons in your areas, and you can teach this. This is not just a conversation for system impacted citizens. This is a conversation for everybody. So I totally agree with you. So that's why I said, hey, the name of my program is the 3 pillars of reentry: the head, the heart, and the hands. A lot of the reentry programs, they want to start with the hands. Get them a job. They need a job. No, you need to start with the head. Condition this mind, right? You need to let them know, okay, this is how prison has affected you. And this is what you can do to change. Then you have to go to the heart, right? Because a lot of them come out, you know, they ain't caring about nobody because they haven't had to care about nobody for all these years. So there's no empathy there. I don't care nothing about you, this, that, and other. So then we go to the heart. And then lastly, we go to the hands. We prepare them for jobs. So I totally agree with you on that one.
Miss Bruno,
So, uh-huh.
I wanted to say this last thing. It's crazy because I know how to articulate certain things that impact me in regards to post incarceration syndrome. I work with a lot of justice involved re-entering citizens, right? And it's amazing because once we get in a group and I start telling them the things that I'm going through, usually the entire group can identify with it. Man, you're right. That be happening to me, but they don't know how to put it in words, nor do they know how to identify it. That's why it's important to be able to create awareness, so that way we have the tools to help people articulate and identify what's going on, and then we can get the appropriate help.
Right. And so that's why I thought it was so important to do the presentation on domestic violence as well as the 6 stages, so that they can recognize these things. Now, Mary, I want to address this, and then we're going to wrap up. We're going to let Tosca wrap up, and then we are going to close out until the next time. Mary, when my husband and I went to therapy, he walked out because I was talking about his behavior in a safe environment, just left me there. Now, this is just me. This is me, and this is what I learned. Kevin and I didn't have a marriage problem. And some people won't understand that. So you didn't have a marriage problem. Why are you divorced now? Kevin needed to, and I'm going to come to Sheila, but some of those traumatic experiences needed to be addressed without me being present. So we didn't go to a marriage counseling. We didn't need to go to marriage counseling. Kevin needed to go to his counselor because there's this thing called exposure. And there's some things that your loved ones have experienced, have seen, have done in prison. You will never know about it. And it may be even haunting them. So no, they don't want to talk about it because there's this thing called exposure. And especially a lot of them don't think that a mental health professional can help them. So they have all of this stuff. Okay, I got all these traumatic things that happened that I've done. If I bring this up and if I present this to this therapist, can she help me? A lot of them are doubtful of that and they're in fear of that. So Mary, I'm saying to you, perhaps you guys need to go to individual therapy. You need to have yours. He needs to have his. And then look, this is what my therapist told me. Because I'm headed there every week with a laundry list of everything that Kevin did. Kevin did this, Kevin did that, Kevin did that. And one day she stopped me. She said, no. She said, we're not talking about Kevin today. We're going to talk about Sheila. And that day she held a mirror up to me to make me see me and showed me some of the things that I was doing that was contributing to the behavior, some of my own behavior. So Mary, you guys may have to go separately. He may feel comfortable of talking to somebody outside of your presence, right? And again, we can't look at them like they have all the problems because we have ours too.
Also, Miss Bruno, one of the things is, and I know this, and a lot of my guys, like who we when we talk about our stuff, man, and we bring up the idea of a therapist or somebody else, this the first thing that's gonna come up. Man, they ain't never been to prison. How they gonna tell me anything about what I've been through?
That's
You
it.
ain't never walked in my shoes, and so and it's some reality to that. That's why it's important for the peer-to-peer thing, right? Because a man can't tell a woman how to have a baby. I can't even relate to that experience, right? It's outside of my experiential ability. However, when women work with women in that sense, because they can experience, they have a deeper insight for things and they can understand things that men can't. It's the same way. That's why it's important for men, right, who have been to prison to be able to get this information and go through the processes themselves, because sometimes people ain't gonna even try to go to nobody if it ain't been something that, if it's not something that they feel like the person can relate through by way of experience.
Right.
Because that was a big thing for me.
Yeah. And I had an opportunity to talk with a psychiatrist, and I was, asking him, hey, I need some therapists. I need a community of therapy, a therapist who can, who willing pro bono to treat these guys. And he said, Miss Bruno, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. He said, as a white man, he said, an African American sitting across the desk from me will not open up to me because I can't relate to his struggles, right? And so they're going to tell me stuff and they're not going to receive what I'm saying. And he said, there's not enough African-American therapists to treat African-Americans. a lot of them won't go to see a therapist if they're not an African American therapist. So we're going to wrap up. I just want to address this. Jackie says, I have a family group, but the families won't come out as much as they need to. So Jackie, have you tried to do virtual? Have you tried to do Zoom? Just get them in the room, right? Yeah, a lot of people don't want to come out of the comfort of their home, but if you can provide maybe a Zoom support group meeting, and this is what I have for the women. You know, we get together once a month, and what has been so awesome is that once a month in the private group for the women, I have system impacted men to come in, and we can ask them questions. And these guys are giving it to us uncut, unedited. And this is the same community that we're going to work on in creating it for the guys, so that they have a safe space where they can come and talk to, again, like the Matakas and the Andrews and the Alvins. So guys, it's 8:30, and we have to wrap up. I hope that you guys have found this segment informative. I hope that it was enlightening to you and have given you a broader system of understanding on domestic violence and post-release symptoms progression. Again, when we come do our lives, it is to educate, to equip, and to empower. It's never to alarm you, but it's to inform you. These are the type of conversations that need to be held more in the arena of reentry, and they are not. So if you have a platform and you would like for us to come and have this conversation, just hit me up and we will show up, right? Because more people need to be talking about this. If you are a system impacted citizen and you want to share, you know, your story, hit us up. You know, we'll love to have you come and be a part of this conversation. I'm very passionate about this thing, guys. I'm very passionate. Kevin and I divorced as of last year, right? But that did not stop. Just because we divorced, that does not stop the mission, nor does it stop my purpose. And I love Mataka and I love Tosca because they are as passionate about this as well. So again, I hope that we have said something that was an aha, enlightenment to you. Again, it's never about just the system impacted citizens. Family members need to come to the table. They need to be a part of the conversation. So until next time, we're going to say good night. The next live, these lives are streamed the third Tuesday of every month at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. So mark your calendars so you can be a part. And if you guys have questions ahead of time that you want us to answer, just send me an email. You can send it at support@wifeafterprison.org. Just send your questions, send your comments, and then we'll address those. Okay. And until next time, Mataka, Tosca, much love to you. I appreciate you guys. Couldn't do it, wouldn't want to do it without you. And so until next time, we're going to say
Thank
good
you for
night.
having us.
Good night.